Yes, thank you for coming today and waking up at a reasonable time. I don't know how good the mocktails were last night, or the actual alcohol-filled cocktails. I'm really sorry that I am sort of like flying in and flying out really quickly. That's very rare for me. I like to participate as much as possible and meet as many people. Can't do that this time. So I have a few requests. There's going to be a bit of participation in this session today. A lot of QR codes, I'm really sorry. The first QR code, just because we're probably not going to have time for proper Q&A and you won't get time to speak to me one-on-one, because some of the topics we're going to be talking about today are quite deep, the questions are not something I can usually answer on stage. But I will do my best to answer questions, respond to comments in this Google Doc, if you have them. So please put them there. I'll do my best to respond to them on my way back this afternoon. Okay. So I haven't been here. I haven't been here through the paper balls of joy that you shared yesterday, which sounded amazing. I've been at a leading design conference in London, and there's a lot of people from the US over, and yeah, there was obviously a lot of toughness and difficulties to this week. And for many people, it's been a tough year, and obviously, almost 5 years since the pandemic. So it's been a tough 5 years. So I just want to, first QR code and a test of Mentimeter, test this works. I just want to check out, how are you feeling right now? Because that might change my approach in this session. And it'd just be interesting to just check in where you're at. Let me know if it's not working, because that will cause some problems. Waiting for presenters. Oh, okay. Interesting. Cool. It's good to get kind of a big read on stuff. I mean, Mentimeter's not perfect. It's good that people aren't really hungover. In some ways, good. Yeah, good that you're excited, inspired. Okay, not too tired. This talk is a deep dive, and it will be quite deep, and it might be a little somber. So it's good to have your energy. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna, you can keep answering that. Thank you. Cool. So I was curious around why push UX is called push, and to try and relate it to this. And there was this thing on the website about truly caring about the advancement of the digital interactive field, which is something that I share. And asking Christian last night on the train to the hotel, I was like, why? Tell me more about it. What is it about? Is it about buttons, or is it about kind of this drive? And he said it was this notion of this strong, active, positive intention, which I thought was perfect for some of what we'll discuss today. So just something to reflect on as we go through this is having to think about maybe what your strong, active, positive intentions might be off the back of this talk, the rest of the talks that you'll experience, the discussions you'll have later today. Just bear that in mind. What might be your intentions? What are you going to take away from this to put into action to engender hope within yourself and others around you? And a lot of that comes down to really what you care about and the impact you might want to have on the world. And ultimately, if you care about something, you want to have the impact. Who do you need and what do you need in order to deliver that impact? And who do you need to do it with? And that's a lot about what we're going to be unpacking today as we start talking about this kind of weird aspect of identity. I took this slide out a while ago of an older version of this talk, but I put it back in because of two reasons. One is because it relates to the fact that, quote Michael Jackson, it's probably more Quincy Jones, who was the start of my tough week this week, as he passed on Sunday, I believe. But if we want to make the world a better place, sometimes we have to look at ourselves for that change as well. We can't just change everyone around us. We might need to adapt as well. And I think that's going to be a big topic of what we're going to talk about today. And then just really annoying serendipity. I was checking my slides, or checking the dates, and I remembered that 7 years ago was, to this day, was the day that I was at the pinnacle of my emotional breakdown. I'd had a really bad client experience. I've talked about that. I'm not going to go into the details today. I've done it in other talks before. But I was in a really dark place inside, even though I was in one of the most beautiful places in the world, sharing all these photos on Instagram about how great it was, preparing for a talk on the beach, and just kind of wondering, can I do this? What's this all about? Why am I here? And that's kind of fed a whole series of 7 years of what I've been calling my identity crisis. So, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to move the mentee along. And typically, I've been doing this in a slightly different way. But, oops, not that one. There we go. So I'm curious if you could respond to the question around, are you currently going through an identity crisis? Or have you been through one? Do you believe you will go through one? Or do you believe you're going to be fine in the future? Or do you have no idea what an identity crisis is and you need that unpacked? So I'm super curious around that. When I've done this in various places that are a little bit more reserved, it's surprising how many people feel like they're going through an identity crisis. I've been having a lot of conversations recently, and even in leading design the past couple of days, people trying to talk about how they might need to drop the label of design in their own identity. And in some ways, I think that can make sense, but it's also deeply saddening. Deeply saddening. I'm really struggling to drop the label of designer in my identity, even though I'm a coach, consultant, and many other things. But there's also other aspects of identity as we start to question our value, or other people question our value, all the things that we often talk about. So I'm just going to see what's coming back. There we go. Okay, so yeah, quite a lot of people been through an identity crisis, a lot expecting to go through, and some in one now. So that's not too bad, that's good. So there's lots of people who've got things to share and that you can learn from, and some people who we can really envy, or they may be just delusional. And yeah, maybe it's not clear what an identity crisis is, I get that. Okay, so often when we start thinking about identity and want to think about the impact in the world, we might be thinking about, what version of ourselves do we want to shift to? Now, we don't have to change ourselves, but if we were, how much of it is a push away from who we are, our unhappiness with ourselves, versus a pull to something more exciting and more liberating? So this is an adaptation of a four forces diagram that's one of the less popular aspects of jobs to be done. But you can apply it to yourself. So what's the push that's pushing me away from who I am right now versus the pull towards this future? But also, what holds you back? What are the things that kind of keep you in your current patterns and your current ways because they're comfortable? Versus what are the things that are concerns or risks about the future? Say if I kind of change career, will I lose the sort of salary that I've become used to if I pursue my joy, for example? So it's interesting to think about these different aspects of you, who you are right now, and really try to understand that, who you might want to be in certain horizons of the future, and how much is driving you versus is holding you back. When I gave a talk from Business to Buttons earlier in the year, Arathi Krishnan was talking about identities being very fluid. And I think that's really interesting, is that this is what makes us human, that we can be constantly changing over time. Maybe you'll change through this talk. Maybe you'll change next week. We're all changing in lots of different ways, but it's not always perceptible. It's not always understandable how much we change. It's a very fluid thing, very dynamic around the world around us. And one way maybe reframe of it is to think of it less of a crisis that we're going through and more of a chrysalis, but maybe an ongoing chrysalis, an ongoing transitionary state that we can be in. Sometimes it peaks in terms of our own awareness of it. Sometimes it can be very, very subtle. Now, when I think about identity, I go to Martin Neumeyer and his 3 questions. So Martin Neumeyer is like a famous brand guru guy, coming from more of a design background, but talking about brand strategy. And he has questions of brands. Who are you? What do you do? And why does it matter? Now, you can ask these same questions of yourself. These are really simple questions, but they're really hard to answer. A typical coaching question would be really, really simple like this. Who are you really? Or what do you really want? And if you really dig down into that, people can spend a lot of time, a lot of sessions kind of unpacking that. Now, the interesting thing is that I believe that every designer, every one of you, every human, but especially designer, is different. And yet we tend to put people into boxes, giving them a title and assuming that 2 different people with the same title will be exactly the same. We put them on the same career ladders. Maybe there's like 2 different directions, more of an individual contributor principal path versus a manager path, but usually on quite restricted, same sort of career paths. And we put them on the same sort of paths in their career, even though all of your journeys to get to where you are right now have all been very different. And I believe that they'll probably be different going forwards. Now, all of these things are really seductive. They're useful. It's the way that humans kind of deal with the world, is the pattern matching and trying to simplify things. But if we're a bit careless with some of this stuff and we're not aware of their limitations, they could really limit our own potential to grow. So every designer is different. Every one of you, like a unique snowflake. So how can you shape the futures you want? By maybe shaping yourself more intentionally. So what I want to unpack here is this model that I've created, a fairly abstract model. I try to kind of bring it to life with some tools that I've created about different layers of self and 4 powers that might help you to think about how you notice and intentionally shift your transition. Now, there's loads of different ways that you can do this work, right? There's loads of different ways we can look at our complex assembly of ourselves, our complex being. There's lots of things you could do with coaching, mentoring. You could be doing a whole bunch of breath work. You could go on an ayahuasca retreat, really find yourself, do a bunch of self-quantification, do psychometric assessments. All of these things can give you a different perspective on yourself. And you might do a mix. And the shaping tools that I'm going to be talking about could be a complement to that or just another way. They're attractive and seductive in some ways because they're simple and visual. And they have their limitations for sure. So using them with these things can be quite valuable. So the tools are really built around being really visually engaging, canvases that help people see themselves through lots of different lenses for individuals and teams. And they're using perfect taxonomies. And I really kind of make that point because as an industry, we couldn't agree on a taxonomy for our industry for sure. I've tried, it's been quite hard. And there are lots of visual canvases like this, lots of things that have a kind of like a family of different visuals that help you to see yourself differently. And I like to think about them as like a kaleidoscope, many different lenses to look at yourselves through. And what's interesting is that it's very rare for 2 different people to be the same through a single lens, let alone multiples. And this is part of the thing, to kind of unpack our own differences. And so what it usually ends up in workshops or kind of stuff within maybe a coaching engagement is like drawing shapes. And the really key thing is the input is the output. So you have a different relationship that you might have with, say, a psychometric assessment where you have like a rigorous answering of questions. It gets a bit boring in some of them. And then you see the results and you go, oh, yeah, I'm one of them, right? You can always associate it in different ways. So there's a more of a dynamic push and pull. And I was at Smashing Conference last week, and John Wilshire was talking about this notion in some systems thinking strategic design work where you're very much trying to show the thing in order so you can change the thing. And it's a big part of what we do as designers is to externalize some of these more abstract things into things that we could align teams around, get around, and so that we can probe and adapt. And so I think that's really one of the principles of this work, showing yourself in a different way so that you can think about how you might want to change it. So you all have should have a handout underneath your chairs or in front of you. And I would invite you, as much as you can today, to do this so we can do some sort of active reflection as we go along, to try to use some of these things and maybe reflect on it afterwards as well, to basically kind of like work along as we go through this talk. So there's multiple sort of dimensions, layers of development which we're going to go through, and different categories of your comfort level, how important things are to you, and where you are currently investing, and where you might want to invest. And so my recommendation is to indicate like current state with a dot or something similar, and an arrow for where you might want to move. But as we go through, I'll try to kind of prompt you to look at these and try to kind of get a bit more active in your own relationship with what I'm going to share, because otherwise it's going to seem quite abstract. Okay, so yeah, that's someone filling it in. There we go. Hopefully it should be straightforward. There we go, cool. Okay, so what are these layers then? So I'm going to talk about this layer of environment, the stuff around you, the technical layer of development, which will be very familiar to you, foundational layers of skills, which allow you to be transferable in the skills you develop over time to adapt to different job roles in the future and have resilience for the future. Relational levels of development, which is all about how you interact with other people and the world around you, and then deeper down into your soul, into your true identity and who you really are, what you really want. So I'm going to try and go through this quickly. This gets a bit personal. And really with the environment, it's really interesting to think about how the environment affects you, and then how you might in turn affect that environment. And that could be anything from society, family, the communities, conferences you go to, organizations you work, and the people around you. And so this is my parents. This is where I get my name, my skin tone. And I'm mixed race. I have a name that people can't pronounce. I have a little bit of Mediterranean temperament, which I've been reining in a lot. I might have some genetic issues that maybe cause some aspects of my health and my cognitive abilities. And strangely, up until recently, I didn't know any word of Turkish, except last year my dad said, well, you know Mesut means happy, don't you? And I was like, what? And if anyone's read any of my stuff or does afterwards, you'll be like, this guy was not happy. Anxiety, depression, all of the emotions. And funnily enough, Jason in Greek kind of means healer. So I'm like the happy healer, healer of happy. It's kind of both ironic and almost like massively purposeful. I'm a middle child, classic middle child, maybe somewhat left alone. As I deal with my ADHD diagnosis, I've had to look into this and maybe how I was felt aspects of abandonment and neediness. That again shows up in a meta level in this talk. And my brothers and my dad, they're this Mediterranean temperament. They're know-it-alls. I'm a little bit of a know-it-all, reining it in. And they're quite argumentative, and I had to mediate between these different characters and stuff. And this plays out in a lot of my adaptation over the years. I grew up in a place called Norwich, a fine city with a great cathedral. And I had the privilege of being mentored into a private school, into a scholarship, which my parents wouldn't have been able to afford. But it put me in an environment that was very foreign, where I didn't fit in, where I had to experience mild racist abuse throughout that time, and really kind of like wonder who I was, be embarrassed about having people come to my home and all these sorts of things. These people were much more well off. I kind of rebelled and went to this place called Chapfield Gardens in Norwich, where I kind of met a whole bunch of punks, skaters, ravers, and all sorts of things. There was girls, which I wasn't used to, an all-boys school. There was recreational drugs, underage drinking, and all sorts of things. And to try and kind of like fit in and stand out, I would often, like at home, kind of be dancing in front of a mirror, wardrobe, to try and dance like Leroy from The Prodigy. And I'm not going to do this for you. No. And I picked up a love of rave culture, something about the unity of that, the dancing, the freedom, and eventually kind of got into being a DJ, into drum and bass, and became a big part of my life and a big part of my character and finding my tribe and connections through friends through that way. And then I went to university, and I learned a lot about different aspects of design and learning to learn in my industrial design course. I got an in-house placement at Yale.com, which is like a digital Yellow Pages, if that's familiar to you. And I had to kind of like design a website a day based on a really shitty brief that was on a piece of paper. It was like, it's got to be about 20 centimeters wide. And I was like, what? It doesn't work like that. So a website a day, pretty much. And eventually, when I left university, I ended up going to management consultancy before that was cool for designers. And I learned a lot about argumentation, selling, facilitation, competition for utilization, and racking up a big expenses budget. And then I kind of flipped again and going into a user experience consultancy where I learned more about user research and really rewiring my brain to think differently about the way that different humans think about the world, right? And that's been a big part of me being an advocate of primary research in most of the projects that I've done ever since. And then I went to a whole bunch of design agencies where it was a little bit more familiar with me. It was a mixture of the design, the research, the UX, and bringing in a whole bunch of different people with loads of different skills. And part of this work that I'm going to share was inspired by the clash of different skills and different designers as they try to work together. And then eventually, after I led the kind of left the more traditional design leadership role, I kind of went back to kind of being more hands-on, but in a more strategic role at a place called Plan, before I ended up setting my own consultancy up about 10 years ago, which is what I've been doing, mixture of coaching, consulting, and strategic design, but also experiencing professional and personal loneliness as I've been kind of mostly independent, working with others, but kind of partially over time. More autonomy, more loneliness. Interaction Design Association has been a big part of me, a big support mechanism over the years. There's probably people I know from interaction conferences over the years. This is the European Local Leaders Retreat. And they're a really big part of me having a tribe and a community that I could fall back on when I moved jobs and when I felt lonely, and those sorts of things really helped me. So a whole bunch of different things in my career, different things I learned from a more functional level, my family and IXEA. And funnily enough, like when I was on the plane to Floripa, I was given an exercise by my coach, Julia Whitney, to map my emotional curve through my career. Now, you can see here, it's quite volatile. Sometimes the highs were when there were the lows. And it was really interesting to kind of look into that and figure out like, what brought me up and what pulled me down. Often my managers and other people, which is super interesting. So all of this stuff kind of inputted, it kind of fed me. It I've been talking about like microbiome recently in terms of kind of gut health, but maybe it's like a kind of psychobiome. This helps to kind of feed a curiosity, whole bunch of inputs that feed your insights, your feelings, your thoughts, your understanding of the world. And I think I've been quite good over the years of soaking all this up so that I could find ways to push it out into the world as well. And that might be from being an early UX portfolio guru many, many years ago. Not anymore, don't trust my advice there. To being a mentor design leader, running workshops, running my own community events. So all of that input helped me push things out. So thinking about the environment, and have a look at the sheets. How comfortable are you with how the environment is shaping you and your contributions to it? Underneath the environmental levels is the technical side. So this is the stuff that will be super familiar to you. The fields of practice, the disciplines of design, maybe the technical skills, the methods that you use. And these essentially are kind of capabilities that are more tied more directly to your profession, like particular job titles say. And you may be familiar with models like the T-shaped designer, T-shaped skills, or even Jared Spool's broken cone people, where there's sort of different levels of different skills. A really good model from a long time ago, Liz Bacon's UX sundial, broke this down in some really useful ways as well. And as I mentioned, when I was in one of these design agencies, we were going through a merger. We had a very, very large user experience team, maybe about somewhere between 30 and 50, which at the time was huge. This was 2005. And my colleague and friend, Warren Hutchinson, had been to an Adaptive Path event and kind of like taken this model of framework and started to kind of encourage people to draw shapes against these different dimensions, like experience, strategy, research, interaction design, and information architecture. And so people would just very quickly draw shapes and indicate an arrow of where they might want it to grow, and then annotate it. And I ended up using this over the years. People made like interactive versions. I used to have it in my slides. People always used to like take pictures of it. Like, what is this weird blob? UX amoeba, it was once called. And it's a really quick tool. I would often use it in interviews, because sometimes when I'm interviewing someone, I would see their portfolio, we'd have a conversation, and I'd be like, right, okay, so this is my shape in this framework. What's your shape? And it'd be interesting to say if they were particularly strong in an area that their portfolio was not representing, to kind of go, oh, right, well, can you talk to me more about that? So it gives us a kind of like a conversational tool. So you've got this on one side, on the back side. The trick here is to do this really quickly. So not spend too long questioning the taxonomy, as I'm sure you as critical-minded UX-type people would love to. But think about what are these different dimensions and how confident or competent do I feel in each of them? And then once you've just drawn your quick shape, maybe just like do little dots first, that can help. Then indicate maybe where that arrow might want to shift, where you might want to grow, or even where you might be happy for it to let go and atrophy. So it's curious how some people can do it really quickly, some people can spend a long time on it. What's really interesting with that one is that I would often do it with people, and sometimes I would kind of draw my shape, and then some people would draw like these really huge shapes. And they were often the people that were more junior or less experienced. And you get these people who do these really tiny shapes, and they were like really, really impressive to me, like really, really, it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, if you're familiar with that. So I have a more complex one, a richer one that's a bit more structured and has a different form factor, and it affects the way that you might fill it in. So there's a few more categories that I'm a little bit more happy with, and you fill it in a radial chart way and maybe indicate where you want to grow and that. We won't do that today, but in a workshop I'd often spend more time here. But then you have questions around like what's a 5 or a 4 or a 3, and have lots of debates around objective ranking, which we won't be discussing today. So I created this with Brenda Laurel, the infamous Brenda Laurel, who a major leader in interaction design. And we used it at the Interaction Conference in Seattle in 2019, and just to kind of get a sense of the different shapes in the community. So super interesting, because like, you know, no one was ever the same. And that's a big part of this work, even at this level. Now, you've all seen these memes, you know, I don't want to labor the point, UX versus UI. I thought that there's some interesting dichotomies around you know, UX versus UI, but other ones like research versus design, strategy versus delivery. And so I could have created this weird framework where you could plot your center of gravity with a dot, and then maybe indicate, you know, your range, so how deep into a particular area you go, and then maybe add arrows where you want to shift your center of gravity or shift, you know, your range. The center of gravity could either be where you're spending most of your time in your current role, or where you're most comfortable. So it's a really weird one, because it kind of starts stretching your brain. You can use lots of different dimensions. I mean, this is good to do with like brand work or positioning work, but usually people just kind of like, where is it on the scale, just the one thing. But adding the range kind of starts to give a sense of, you know, what's your I don't know, your adaptability in certain situations. And I have one for leadership that's really important for like people who want to think about situational leadership. So that's some examples of some technical stuff. And obviously you get down to things like software, Figma, maybe even Canva, we were talking about earlier. So just quickly on that bigger sheet, like just maybe mark how comfortable you are with your technical capabilities. You want to grow there more? Usually people do. That's fine. Are you happy? Is that not where you want to be putting your focus? So as we go a bit deeper, we start going into this layer which I call foundational. So this is more about sort of the foundational skills that help you to understand, to think, and then to communicate with others. So this is stuff that sometimes you learn at school, and then you kind of drop it, and it becomes part of these other technical skills and other sorts of things. And then later on, you realize how important it is to do things like listening, and be really conscious of like developing that listening skill, or really be conscious of developing critical thinking skills, or really be conscious of like speaking on stage or speaking in front of people. So I've got a model here, another sort of radial diagram that starts talking about this, and you'll see that listening kind of exists in the understanding part of the dial, as well as in the communication, because active listening is very much to kind of indicate that you are listening to someone and that you are interesting to them, for example, as well. So lots of different things there. And my collaborator, Eva Lotta Lamb, if you're not familiar with her, she's an incredible interaction designer, or was an incredible interaction designer. She tries to help people hone their visual thinking skills. And she's incredible at it. She kind of breaks it down in lots of ways to make it simpler. And this is something that I've seen lost over the years in designers. And it's a real shame, because you can think beyond the Figma in ways that kind of break you out of the design system and stuff. I've also kind of got some aspects of this which are thinking about different modalities of thinking or communicating. And these just kind of help you thinking, what's your kind of leaning in terms of the types of being you are and how you're showing up? And is this something you can shift and change? So there's a lot more to be said about the foundational skills and maybe the relationship between them and technical skills. But I guess the point with foundational skills is that they kind of sit in a way that they grow over time, and you could forget about them. But if you were to change role, like move into product or move into business or be an entrepreneur, there's so many things that you would take with you beyond the Figma, beyond maybe formal user interviews or information architecture. You would probably take a lot of things that are foundational to those roles. And so kind of really thinking about the foundational roles helps you to be resilient for the future, your future. So it's a really good one to kind of be thinking about and how you can continually develop over time. And one of my favorite layers is the relational layer. This is something that I've been really active at developing over the years. And I think that there's an aspect of me, because of my upbringing, my family situation, being the middle child, feeling uncomfortable in certain situations, having to kind of more consciously interact with people and try to fit in. And so one of the impacts of that to me is maybe kind of having like multiple personas. And I believe that we all have multiple personas in different ways. The difficulty can be if one of those personas is so foreign to who we really are, that's when we can experience a lot of burnout. Because we can be spending time being someone that's like not who we really are. So this is thinking about like how we behave in different contexts, how we show up, what are the different versions of ourselves, and thinking around these sort of human interaction, softer skills that we all talk about, but really, really hard to kind of develop a lot of the time. And this is also where maybe leadership skills come in. And the learning and certifying being a coach has been really helpful for me to hold back advice and to connect with people in better ways and deal with people who might typically be my enemy in the old Jason's world. But now I could better understand them through my curiosity. So how comfortable are you with how you interact with others in different contexts? So these are some of my personas. I have multiple personas. They're slightly different. There's a lot of overlaps between being a coach, designer, consultant, and leader. Not to unpack here. There are some differences as well. But I also have these other kind of like personal personas as well. And it's interesting how sometimes the personal parts of you can help you connect with other stakeholders, other business people as well. Especially like having kids or having a dog, having these other things, or certain music you like, becomes this sort of connective tissue. Like you might not agree on the right thing to prioritize in the roadmap, but you might be able to have a conversation at this level, and they go, "Oh, right, you're not such a bad person, really, right?" And try to find interest in those people. It was really interesting recently because I had a photo shoot, which is something I really didn't want to do. I'm not vain, honestly, please. And the photographer a couple of years ago I wanted her to kind of photograph me at a conference when I'm talking to people. And she's like, the light's not going to be so good. It's like, okay, we'll go to the South Bank in London and like all this brutalist architecture, and I'll have this like, yellow jacket on, and it looked really cool and all this futuristic, but it was really cold. It wasn't really me. It was all this posing. It was like really odd. So I had a photographer come and just photograph me in lots of different contexts at a workshop I was running, and just got to see, it was really interesting just to see myself in these different contexts. So I've become a bit interested in like using photography to kind of understand people and play it back to them in different ways. So there's me in a coaching one-on-one situation where I'm most comfortable, kind of interacting around the tables or presenting in certain situations I'm more comfortable than others, or really thinking, or maybe having an argument with someone. So, thinking about how you might adapt to different types of people in different situations. So I'm just going to quickly move this one on and ask you a question around this one, which is, just a single word or a couple of words, as many as you want. Like, have a think about what are the most important qualities of a modern-day designer. You might think about the relational aspects or the foundational skills, maybe the technical skills. But what do you think are the most important qualities of a designer in the world we live in right now? So let's have a look. We're getting up to 200. I think there's like 600 people here. I saw some people not participating. I get it. You don't have to. It's all useful. This is where like Mentimeter breaks when you have this many people. It doesn't dedupe. But some familiar themes come up there. I'll let that run for a bit if you want to keep adding to it. In 2005, similar time to when Warren introduced this kind of blob mapping type framework, I was creating a poster for the first URIA conference, and I was curious around like what made a good designer in our space. And at the time, we used to call them experience architects in the agency that I was at. And so I asked a whole bunch of colleagues, peers, clients, when you've been working with these people, who are the best? Like, what was it about them that made them good to work with or create great results? And it was super interesting seeing the results. It was a mixture of sort of foundational skills, qualities, interpersonal skills, like a lot of team stuff, right? A lot of team collaboration skills, and a little bit of knowledge, but not too much technical skills stuff. It was super interesting because I asked a broad question. And so it could have been people saying prototyping, but that didn't come up lots. It could have been people saying like, oh, wireframing at the time, So it was kind of an ordered list, lots of stuff about team player. The thing about the empathy thing was that it wasn't just empathy for the users, it was empathy for colleagues, all different people around you. And it's something that often designers, I think, and researchers are not so great at. So we created this kind of framework, and we kind of got people to peer review different members of the team and kind of score them in different ways. And a famous usability guru, who I won't name here, and created this kind of like visual sort of metaphors of the different aspects of what made a good user experience or the perfect user experience architect. So things around, being eloquent, the silver tongue, having a balanced brain between the rational and the intuitive or creative thinking, the heart of gold, the passion, or a strong backbone, standing up for ideas when you knew they were right, the safe hands and kind of strong arms and legs, a bit tenuous, for delivery, to kind of see things through. And one of my favorites, the bifocal eyes, being able to see the big vision, the holistic system, but also having an anal attention for detail. Now, if you think about these different things, it's actually really hard to be really strong in all of these. It's unlikely that you're going to be strong in all those areas. And so the notion of it being a perfect person was a bit tongue-in-cheek. The whole point was that we would blend these different skills and different types of people together based on the project need. And this kind of framework helped to kind of decode some of that. So I still use this taxonomy to the day, even though it's a bit impure compared to the rest. It's kind of a mixture of different levels through the layers of development. And you kind of fill it in a radial chart way. You'll spend a bit more time. People really struggle with some of the aspects. There's a lot of stuff here that's actually quite hard to explain, especially when you kind of get into realms of creativity and lateral thinking and conceptual thinking, say. And so I often ask that same question that I ask you, and it's probably close to 2,000 designs. I need to update this. But as you may be able to see here, empathy always comes up near the top. But the funny thing is, when you do analysis on it, like when I really deduped everything and I kind of did the thorough analysis, empathy was smaller than these 3 C's. And I was really warmed by this. Creativity was coming up was the strongest, even though I don't see it day to day in our work. Collaboration being so strong, I hear a lot about that. And there's things about curiosity, and curiosity is one of the most powerful things for me. I believe curiosity really fuels empathy, but it also fuels the creativity, feeding that psychobiome, like observing the world, the people around you, and trying to engage in people so that you can collaborate. So for me, curiosity is like this huge foundational skill, and one of the hardest things to cultivate and to talk about. A whole other talk one day. Several years, I can't remember exactly how long ago, but it was one of the last jobs I actually went for as a design leader. I'd been in my business a few years, and there was a company that was opening up a London office, and they were like perfect for me, a mixture of industrial design, interaction design. They were working in mobility like I was for the same client. And they approached me, and I was like, cool, we're going to do this. And then they were like, oh, right, can you share a portfolio? And remember, I used to be this portfolio guru, like, because I was hiring a lot. And I didn't have a portfolio. I spent ages pulling together this portfolio and even got a kind of testimonial from a client who wouldn't normally be able to kind of attribute my work to theirs. And then they ghosted me. Before, ghosting was cool, as it is now. And I was really upset. I was angry. And I use my anger and upset when I get over it, like the next day or next 2 days maybe, and tried to think about what was it they were looking for? What aspects of leadership were they wanting beyond like doing some cool UI and some innovative thinking, whatever? What were these responsibilities of leadership that they wanted? And so I worked with my friend Martina Hodges-Shell, and we kind of scoped out a whole kind of range of functional areas that might be in tension with like delivery and kind of craft like UI work. So things like the vision and strategy for the team or the products and services, the community, external community coming in to do things at events like this, nurturing the team, individuals, ensuring good quality, strategic quality, but also delivery and executional quality, or kind of getting good practices and processes in place. Collaborating with other stakeholders, other people in the organization, or building other sort of organizational capabilities. So, diffusing design in the organization. This is sort of the realm at its extreme is maybe doing design thinking for an organization. And then advocacy, like this kind of like selling, kind of like communicating, proving and demonstrating and shouting and about the value. And so the really interesting one, and this evolved over lots of different kind of conversations with the design leaders, was you could kind of map multiple dimensions to it. So in a similar way, you could do this with a lot of the different tools. But what we did with this one was try to kind of indicate with one color, like how much time relatively are you spending in each of these areas in one color, say like blue here. And then green, like how confident are you in each of these different areas? And then the really interesting one, how much do you enjoy doing these things? And it's super interesting when you see the delta between where you're spending time and what you enjoy. Sometimes there's correlation between what you enjoy, what you're confident in. Sometimes you don't have any time to do the thing you're enjoying, and you're spending lots of time doing the thing that you hate. Now, this can be used for not people necessarily with design leader, design manager titles. It can be used across the team. And it's super interesting if you do it across the team. You could do it with your design leadership team. You could do it in like the whole team. And it might be that there's someone in your team that loves doing the thing that you hate. And they're not spending any time on it, and you're spending all your time. Great opportunity for development, great opportunity for delegation, and all those sorts of things. But this becomes a kind of conversational tool. And one of the people that I was coaching started to use it in interviews because he had a bad experience in a role. The expectations of the role changed over time, and he lost his job. He's like, I didn't know that you now needed me to do this. So when he was going into interviews, he was like saying, right, I've got this job spec, I've got all these bullet points of all the things I have to do, loads of them. To what degree? Like, which one's more important? So it became a conversational tool, and most of the time, people couldn't answer it. Right? It's weird. So an interesting tool, just to kind of flesh it out and think to yourself, what kind of leadership style, person do you want to be? And then going back to this kind of model, this onion skin of your domains and who you serve, is thinking about this idea that as a leader, in various ways, whether by title or not, you are serving other people. A lot of the time, we jump to kind of thinking we're just serving customers and users in the world and society and the planet and all those sorts of things. But if we don't have an understanding of how we can provide value to other people in the organization, then we're probably not going to get to delivery. So how can you connect the dots between those things and create like linkage between the value systems of those people? And this one is a really hard one where I get people to kind of distribute 100 points of where they're delivering their value consciously to these different things. And challenge them and just say, maybe there's an opportunity to kind of understand more about a particular colleague and understand what they need and try and kind of get the mutual win. And then to take it a step further is thinking about those different stakeholders and then maybe mapping this sort of what I'm calling like an empathy spectrum. Lots of debates on different ways you can unpack empathy. But from the extreme of sort of being completely ignorant of someone else and what they value and what they do, to being indifferent, I don't care, to being sympathetic, are they just not enlightened? Stupid product managers. Sorry, Matt. No, he's a great one. He's a good guy. No, yeah, oh, well, yeah, true. To kind of really caring or really having that sort of emotional empathy rather than maybe cognitive empathy for people, really caring about things. But then actually, empathy can be a bit of a trap as well. It can get in the way of you doing good work. For me, sometimes compassion is the thing that you really want. It's like that drives action, a compulsion to act for the benefits of someone. So I get people to kind of think about these different stakeholders and map where they're at, where they think they might want to shift that. Another tool is what I call perception deltas. And that's really around thinking about how you perceive yourself and maybe how other people are perceiving you. So it starts kind of with maybe, it's easy to kind of start in the middle and go out, how you behave in different situations. And then you can kind of think about who you want to be, but also that really depends on who you are really, which is quite tough work. And then on the other side, other stakeholders, you could do this with lots of different ones, is thinking about how they perceive you and your behavior in different contexts. So that's where feedback comes in. And you can understand from them who they need you to be, but also who do they think you really are? And it's super interesting if you were to kind of try and map this and try to get the data to it, to kind of think about maybe how you're showing up and how you might want to modulate that and calibrate it. And the interesting thing is maybe this is you're moving from dancing like Leroy to kind of finding a way to do more collaborative dance. If you're familiar with, is it Save the Lance dance? Where, I can't remember her name, but she's like a ballet dancer, and she's basically kind of vibing, bringing her own particular style to connect with other people. And if you think about dancing, there's something about chemistry and a flow within that. So, I really love dancing with certain other people, but I attribute it to kind of collaborating with other people. And sometimes I have to be more conscious. Sometimes it's a bit more natural. But have a think about you're not just dancing alone all the time. You've got to dance with other people in order to kind of get along. So these foundational relational skills are transferable to other roles beyond design. And so they can be really, really helpful for you if you think about a more resilient career, and can help you be successful, maybe, in your design career. The last one is about identity. This is really about your values and purpose and this kind of notion of the authentic self, who you really are. And this is really hard work. This is where you go deep. This is where things like therapy or some coaching will explore who you really are and what you really want. And this quote really says it to me. Is this notion is related to burnout, I think. It's you often feel tired not because you've done too much, but because you've done too little of what sparks a light in you. Often we don't really think about what sparks a light in you. What sparks a light in you? like I showed you before with the career timeline, I have an exercise, you do that. And you do similar things like job titles and map maybe where the highs are, the lows and things as well. This can help give an insight into what you enjoyed doing, what was memorable, where the impact was. You can do an exercise, this is a classic coaching tool, the Wheel of Life, different aspects of your life and where you're happy with how happy you are with different aspects of your personal or work life, and then maybe where you want to shift. Maybe think about, using kind of like brand style adjective words that kind of think about your human qualities and how you show up. And then, like artifacts like a leaving card or birthday party where you project yourself into the future and maybe write notes that other people, what you hope other people would say about what impact you had on them and how you were when doing that. And when I did this for Native Birthday Party exercise as part of my coaching, it helped me to kind of focus on like my vision, my outcomes, my principles of behavior, and some of the initiatives that I'm still working through to this day. So how comfortable are you with who you really are? Do you know? How has it changed? So there's all these different layers, and I'm going to kind of go quickly now. Oh, God, that's a new one. There we go. Train at midnight transition. So all these different layers. And the interesting thing, if you're familiar with Pace and Sherry layers, there's a kind of a similar thing going on with this. The faster change often happens on the outside, the environment, the technical stuff. And the stuff inside is maybe slower change. But the stuff inside is harder to understand. It's more complex. It's less comfortable. It's more lonely. It's more individual. It takes a lot of work, but the reflection and self-discovery that you can do helps you be better in your work, helps you to express and create and know who you are and be happy with who you are. Which layers of self are you most connected to and actively investing in? So I'll just go very quickly for this. All these different models help. They frame perspectives. The different visual canvases can help in a more accessible way. Many lenses to look at yourself through. The shaping workshops I run would kind of help to engage designers and gather data and to kind of help like teams or publicly to kind of do this. Going in lots of different places around the world at conferences, and I keep doing this because people still find it useful. I want to do more. Running workshops in different countries, playing with Skittles, it's quite fun sometimes. Making sure that, you show the thing so that you can change the thing. And you can kind of, in team things, you can put them up and see some of the differences, see some of the patterns and understand that, and see how everyone is different and how you are different from them. And on Miro boards and mural boards, you can do this as well. And the thing can be not just you, but the team as well. So you can kind of analyze and kind of do some visual analysis, and you can do some kind of more structured things. I've got a whole series of Medium articles that are from 2018, I think, that kind of go into a lot of these tools, and I'm trying to kind of bring it all together into a book. I'm still struggling to get through. Eva Lotterland is helping me. And it's organized by some modes of self-strategy, some different tools, some different ways to use them. It's about 29. I'm trying to do the 30th at the moment. And organized by different kind of contexts of where you might be in your career, just to help make it a bit easier from starting out to like losing the love. And so different sequences for those different things. Now with all of this, I believe that this helps to strengthen 4 powers. The power of perspective, and this can be a perspective on the outside world and the inside of you. There's a great kind of word called keski in the Japanese, apparently means like the perspective or the view that you get once you've been through the struggle. And I love that. Perspective you only can have once you've been through the struggle. That enables you to kind of have a better idea of the possibilities ahead of you, and maybe to figure out what pursuit you go after. And that can feed and be informed by your purpose. So there's a relationship where the perspective inspires the possibilities and clarifies the pursuits, which fuels the perspective. And maybe that can inform the purpose, and the purpose can guide all of these things. And it's an iterative process. It's a cycle, and I'm trying to get some sort of triangle version of this. So there's an early version of that. So as I close, I think these things, the boxes, ladders, and paths, are really useful, seductive, but they can be quite limiting. How can you think about unique shapes that you have and look at yourself through many lenses, through the many layers? Thinking about these 4 powers. Now, it's been 7 years, as I said. There's no quick fixes for this stuff. People sell tools and workshops, and mentoring and coaching can help, therapy as well to a degree. But it takes time, and it can often take a team around you. Meaningful transformation can take a lot of time. These are just some of the people that have helped me over those 7 years. Coaches, friends, family members, therapists, all sorts. So really important to try and find your team, not just kind of focus on the tools. People love to help. There's a great quote, timely I suppose with presidential stuff, from Maya Angelou, I can't say her name, Maya Angelou on the Pulse of Morning. Each new hour holds new chances, a new beginning. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change. And it's actually used in one of my favorite drum and bass tracks. So coming back to what Araf was saying, identities are fluid. It's what makes us human. And how can we understand that to make hope possible rather than the despair inevitable? So what will be your next steps of change? What will be your strong, active, positive intentions, your push? Which layers of self will you be investing in and how? If you go back to your sheet, if not now, then later, have some reflection, take some time out, look at this stuff. And if you have any further questions, thoughts, reflections, please share them on this Google Doc. I will do my best to respond to them as quickly as possible and follow up if needs be. Thank you very much.